All right. So our warm-up slide here. No warm-up question again because we're going to do a pair deck, so we don't really need a warm-up question here. Otherwise, our learning target, once again, we're kind of just hitting on a couple of topics here that we don't have a whole lot of time to dive into further. But we'll talk about the accomplishments of the Ottoman Empire and the Mughal Empire. So we'll talk about where those are and who they are and kind of their biggest accomplishments here. Once again, like I said, just kind of hitting on some of the highlights here, some of the stuff that we don't have time to really get to. The important stuff here, though, in the homework tab, the project is due today, as I mentioned earlier. Doesn't have to be like by the end of class or anything like that. As long as it's turned in today, you'll be good. I'll be grading those over the weekend, so get that turned in as soon as possible. And then the Japan assignment was also due today. So that was what we did on Wednesday. That was just a video, and then there was a reading portion to that as well. Hopefully it wasn't too difficult or anything like that. But yeah, those are our due dates that are important here. Not going to have any homework or anything over this weekend before we go back to school on Monday. Cool. So before we jump into the actual lesson then today, are there any questions about the project or about the assignment or anything else like that? Okay. Cool. So the other thing then I guess I'm going to point out is that on the project, I talked about it before break that the project was kind of leading up to an open note test about China. What I decided to do is to just get rid of that test. I just don't think it's useful for us with only a week and a half left in the semester to do a test over something that was before Christmas break. So yeah, the project is still due. The project is going to be worth, a regular project grade, but there is not going to be the test portion of it. So hopefully that's some good news there as well. So kind of getting rid of that. All right. So let me double check my attendance here real quick. Alrighty. So I'm just missing a couple people. Okay. So let's go ahead then and jump into our pair deck here. So I'm going to put a link in the chat. You can click and it'll put you in. But we're going to do a pair deck over these two topics here today. So All right. We're at 19. I think that's most of us here. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So today, like I said, we're kind of hitting on two different topics here. We're going to talk about the Ottoman Empire first, and then we'll talk about another empire called the Mughal Empire. So we'll look at where those are and kind of what their important or some of their important contributions here are. So the first is the Ottoman Empire here, and their kind of big accomplishment is going to be the fact that they are going to take down the city of Constantinople. So way back in the beginning of the semester, we talked about Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire, and this is going to be how they ended, what kind of happened to them. So first of all, we're talking about this area here that's circled in red, which we've talked about this area quite a bit in this semester as an important area. And it's called Anatolia, is what kind of that region of land is. It's also sometimes called Asia Minor. So looking at this location here, the paradox asking you, why is this location important? What is this? Why is this a big deal for an empire to control at this period of time? All right, let's take a look at our responses here so far. So we got around water, good for travel. It was the Holy Lands, good, and trade routes. Land connection near Turkey, making it good for trade. Exactly. Major trade areas. Control trade on water and land, close to water. Trade location, water for transport, good port area for trading. The Holy Lands were definitely, yep. Constantinople's there. Yes, good. Trade. Yeah, good. So it looks like most of us got kind of the right ideas here. So the first one is that the Holy Lands are right here, modern day Israel down here. So definitely important for the three major world religions at this point in this area, Islam, uh, Christianity, and Judaism, all kind of centered around that. It's where the Crusades were going to. So definitely important there. And then probably the bigger one here in terms of economics is trade. So somebody mentioned that it's looks like there's a land connection here in present day Turkey. That is definitely true, and where a lot of trade was going. And then the connections to the water here in the Mediterranean, and then coming down into the Red Sea to get to India, which would be kind of off the map to the right here. Also very, very important. So definitely an important trade location as well. It's kind of this kind of crossroads between Europe and Asia, which is over here off the map. Not a lot of people wanted to travel up through Russia. It's cold. Winters aren't that great up there. It's not easy traveling up here. Much faster to go through this area here, either by water or by land. So definitely a good spot there. So let's see how we do on this geography question. So it says, where is Constantinople? Let's see if we can place it on a map here. So you've got a little star icon that you can drag around. Go ahead and drag it on this giant blank map. Where do you think Constantinople is? It's been a long time since we talked about them. It was back in September, was probably the last time we really mentioned them, as well as the Byzantine Empire that they were centered on. All right. Pulling up our stars here. We've got a few different guesses. Looks like most of us are kind of falling in the right spot here, though. Kind of this area here between Anatolia and Europe, and that is correct. So here is my map here with the red star. That is Constantinople there. So when someone pointed out that it looks like Turkey connects to Europe, you were correct, and that's on the city of Constantinople. That's what they controlled there. So it's a connection between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean here, but also a connection of land between Europe and Asia. So when we talked about Constantinople, we mostly talked about it under the control of Justinian. And so Justinian, the leader of the Byzantine Empire, and his empire looked like this. So by the end of his reign in 565, he controlled all of this area in kind of this lighter shade of red, centered on Constantinople here as the capital, but they controlled all the way past Rome, and even into the Holy Lands down here. So Byzantine Empire was a huge thing at this point because they controlled this area between Europe and Anatolia. Doesn't look like that, though, by the year 1400. So almost 1,000 years later, and the Byzantine Empire has kind of begun to crumble. A series of poor leaders, bad management, money problems, lavish spending from the emperors and things like that has led to a massive decline in the Byzantine Empire, and they control basically just the city of Constantinople. They also control this other city, Thessalonica, and some areas down here as well. But the Byzantine Empire is now very, very tiny and thus very weak, which kind of puts a target on the back of the city of Constantinople because a lot of people are going to want to control that area. So the Byzantine Empire was very weak, despite Constantinople being an easily defendable city. The weakness of the empire left it open. So basically the reason Constantinople hadn't been taken yet is that the city is surrounded on three sides by water, and had massive, 30, 40-foot walls kind of surrounding the city, and then also had those walls on the landward side as well. So it was not an easy city to take over, and that's pretty much the reason it hadn't been at this point in 1400. So in come the Ottoman Empire. They are going to be the ones to finally conquer the city. So they are ruled by what are called Ghazis, or warriors of the Islamic faith. And so the Ottoman Empire are always going to be ruled by these people called sultans, which translates to ruler. So makes sense, right? But Sultan Osman I is going to unite the empire, kind of expand them, especially in that area of Anatolia, and kind of keep that area. So in 1453, the Ottoman Empire actually controlled the land on both sides of Constantinople. And pretty much the only thing keeping them from taking the city was time. So now that they controlled both sides of the city, an attack would be possible. They could actually, surround the city even from the water, and they decide to put it under a siege. Now, part of what helped them was a fairly new invention. So we talked about the invention of gunpowder in China. Well, it had been weaponized by people in the West. And so this relatively new invention of the cannon was crucial in attacking those massive walls that surrounded Constantinople. And this is one of the actual guns that was used here. And you can see a person standing here. Just look at the size of this cannon. It was a force to be reckoned with. Imagine these roll up outside your city and are starting to threaten you. Now, realistically, these cannons actually weren't very good because they were very difficult to load and aim. But when you managed to get a shot off, its destruction was pretty evident. So did a lot of damage to the walls of the city. So the city was put under siege for 2 months. I think we've talked about what a siege is before, but our Pear Deck here is asking, what does that mean to put the city under siege for 2 months? All right, let's see our responses here. Trapped inside, being attacked, getting cut off from trade, had to wait for the right time, was surrounded by their enemy. They surrounded Constantinople, attacked, stopped all trade, slowly killed from the inside like a lockdown. No one is allowed to leave the city. You hold the city, blockade. Yeah, exactly. It looks like we're on the right track. They were trapped. So basically, they surround the walls of the city. They prevent all trade from coming in or out. And so the city slowly starts to starve and basically kind of bombarded by these cannons pretty much 24/7. So they were kind of trapped inside. So we saw the same thing happen to Rome back when in the beginning of the semester, when we talked about the fall of that city, that they were kind of just slowly starting to starve. And over the course of 2 months, they kind of were forced to open the doors. And one final assault allowed the Ottomans to break in. So here's a painting of that kind of final siege, that final assault, these giant walls of Constantinople that they're trying to get into. You can even see that cannon here, like we saw in the last picture, is in the bottom left here. But this massive assault ends up being successful. City of Constantinople falls to the Ottoman Empire, and they will control it for the time being. So they convert the city to an Islamic city. So if we remember, the city of Constantinople was a Christian city. It was the center of Eastern Christianity. The Hagia Sophia was kind of this power symbol for Justinian, and it ends up getting converted to a mosque. The city is also renamed to Istanbul, and that is still what it is called today. So if you ever hear the city Istanbul, they are talking about what used to be Constantinople. So that was kind of the fall of Constantinople, probably the biggest achievement of the Ottoman Empire here. All right. That was topic number one. Like I said, just kind of touching on something fairly briefly and then moving on. So our other topic then is going to be the Mughal Empire. So Mughal. We're going to talk about a couple of their emperors, where this empire is at, and what kind of makes it important. So, Pear Deck question here asks, what is a Mughal? Has anybody ever heard that word? Have you ever heard anybody described as a Mughal? Let's go ahead and take a minute here and think about that. If you've ever heard that term before, and if so, maybe what context was it used in? All right, let's see our responses. Haven't heard it. Fighters, never heard it. Nah. Sounds familiar, but no. That's okay. So I was curious as to anyone had ever heard this word before. I saw fighters in there, which is an interesting thought, because it does kind of look like the word Mongol, and it actually does sort of come from the word Mongol, because it was founded by a descendant of Genghis Khan. But a Mughal is actually used usually to talk about somebody who is rich and powerful. So usually somebody who has a lot of control over some sort of business. So for say an example would be, I've heard in the music industry, people say Jay-Z is a music mogul because he makes music, he produces it, he owns a record label, he owns Tidal music. So he owns a lot of different things and has a lot of control over the music industry. Or Steven Spielberg would be an example of a movie mogul, because he's directed so many things, because he has such kind of star power in the movies that he makes, that people kind of recognize him. So mogul tends to be somebody who is powerful, has a lot of money, and a lot of control. So the word Mughal actually comes from the Mughal Empire, which was in modern day India. So India right here on the map. And India has come up a lot for us this semester, actually, because we talked about the fact that people wanted to trade with them, particularly the people of Europe. So they would take these trade routes by water to get to India to trade for some of the silks and spices that were coming from there in China. It was a good access point there. So India has been very important, and this Mughal Empire were the ones that people were trading with. So it was first kind of established by this guy Babur in 1526. It was the first Muslim empire in this area. And as I mentioned before, he is a descendant of Genghis Khan. Through one of his relatives, we know a lot of people were related to Genghis Khan, so I guess this isn't too surprising. But that's kind of how his family got there and where he came from. So the Mughal Empire is going to be known for its wealth and power. So they are pretty much trade moguls, right? So using that word here. So they were known for their religious tolerance, and they had relative peace amongst the many religions that kind of met within this area, at least early on. So it was controlled by Babur and his descendants who were Muslims, but there were tons of Hindus, especially there as well, Christians, and this newer religion called Sikhism or Sikhs were also there. And so they had this religious tolerance, and it was also making a lot of money because, as I mentioned, a lot of spices were coming from India, and traders from Europe were trying to get there to trade. So, one of the biggest achievements of the Mughal Empire, or one of the things that has lasted until present day, is this building right here. So we've got two questions here. First of all, what is this building? Do you recognize it? Take a guess if you don't know. It probably looks familiar. You might not know the name of it. And then the second question, what do you think it's for? So what is this building called, and what do we think it's used for? All right. Let's see our guesses. So first one, we got Taj Mahal. That is correct. That is what it was called, and you spelled it correctly. Very good. Taj Mahal may be a religious place, say religion, some dead wife's grave, looks like a cathedral, could be used for anything. Don't know the name, but you recognize it. Good. Cemetery, don't know the name, where they write laws. Tourism, maybe religion, but a castle, maybe a castle, a church. No idea. That's okay. Can't remember, but it's a tomb and used for religious purposes, used for speeches. Good. So yeah, this building is called the Taj Mahal. So I'm glad some of you knew the name of that, and that's okay if you couldn't spell it. It's kind of a tough word to spell. But I saw a couple people actually had the correct guess as to what it was used for, because this building was built with one purpose, and that is as a tomb for the wife of one of the leaders of the Mughal Empire. So Shah Jahan was the leader of the Mughal Empire for 30 years, from 1628 to 1658. So it was built as a tomb for his favorite wife, who died giving birth to her 14th child. Yeah, there's a lot in that sentence. He's also buried there. But first of all, it was his favorite wife. He had 6 of them. So, unlike Henry VIII, who divorced his wives in between, Shah Jahan didn't follow those rules and married all of his wives at once. So he had 6 wives, but this one was his favorite. And with just this wife, he had 14 kids. So I don't know how many kids he had with his other wives, but 14 from one person, that's a lot. And she died giving childbirth. So he loved her very much. So he commissioned this massive building to be built to bury her and himself inside of. And that was kind of the express purpose of it. Very, very large undertaking, a very impressive building. nonetheless. Another example of kind of the power of the Mughal Empire was the throne that Shah Jahan had built. It was called the Peacock Throne, and it had 3 statues of peacocks. And these feathers were made out of gold, diamonds, and emeralds. So lots of money and value into this very fancy throne for himself to sit on within his capital city in the city of Delhi. So yeah, lots of money and power going on here within the Mughal Empire. The problem, though, is that these things were expensive. So yes, they were a very rich empire, but these things cost a lot of money. And so he started to tax his people quite heavily, especially for the creation of the Taj Mahal, because he had to pay people to build it and pay for the materials and all that sort of stuff. And that led to kind of some massive unrest against him. People were not happy that he was spending a majority of the country's wealth on a tomb for his wife. Seemed like a bad expense for the people of India. And then he also started to kind of become or intolerant of non-Muslim religions. So all of that religious tolerance that had been happening before was starting to go away. And he was also spending a lot of money on war. So no matter how much money they were bringing in, they weren't exactly spending it very wisely. So Shah Jahan was followed by his son Aurangzeb, or one of his sons, right? Remember, he had a lot of them. But he actually throws his own father in jail and kind of doubles down on being a very harsh ruler. So he doesn't even tolerate other types of Islam. So there are 2 types of Islam. There's Sunni and Shia. And he is a supporter of Sunni Islam. And so he even doesn't even support other Muslims within his country and is continuing to kind of wage these expensive wars, especially against people of different religions. So kind of because of this poor leadership, because of all of the wars he was fighting, they couldn't afford to keep them up. And it's going to eventually lead to the decline and end of the Mughal Empire because they are unable to keep this sort of thing up. So all of that power and wealth is going to kind of go away because of poor leadership. And that's kind of our basic overview here of the Mughal Empire. So Taj Mahal kind of being the big takeaway from that one. Very famous building that you probably recognize, right? But now maybe know a little bit more about. And the Mughal Empire that we kind of discussed a lot because of the amount of trade coming in and out of there. All right. So we'll end on that. I'm going to stop presenting my screen. All right. So that is going to wrap things up for today. So just a couple of reminders. Remember, get those projects turned in before the end of the day if you haven't done so already. Email me if you have any questions, but make sure those things are getting done. Otherwise, we will end things there. So I hope you guys have a good weekend, and I will see some of you on Monday and the rest of you on Tuesday. So have a good one.